The Battle of Waterloo was fought in 1815. After the Sixth Coalition's occupation of Paris, Napoleon abdicated as French Emperor and was exiled to Elba Island. The monarchy was reinstated and Louis XVIII crowned king, but his reign soon became unpopular. Aware of his appeal and with many soldiers still loyal to him, Napoleon escaped from Elba, landed in France and gained support marching to Paris. King Louis fled and large crowds welcomed back the former emperor. Despite his offers of peace, a seventh coalition of Prussia, Britain, Austria and Russia was formed to overthrow Napoleon, and they agreed to march on Paris. Napoleon launched preemptive attacks to prevent the coalition forces from uniting against him. At Ligny, a Prussian army were defeated but not destroyed. Napoleon then headed to the village of Waterloo where the British were waiting. The French, led by Napoleon, had around 78,000 soldiers, 14,000 cavalry and 250 cannons. Commanded by the Duke of Wellington, the British had about 80,000 soldiers including Germans and Dutch, 10,000 cavalry and 150 cannons. Wellington sent soldiers to occupy the farmhouses of Hougoumont and La Haye-Saint. The remains of the Prussian army, around 50,000 men that were going to join Wellington, had not yet arrived and were marching to Waterloo. The battle started at 11 AM with the French firing cannons at Hougoumont. 30 minutes later, French units advanced towards the farmhouse, but they came under attack from Wellington's German soldiers hiding in trees in front of the building. More French were needed to clear the woods, but the British still held the house and were shooting from behind garden walls. Wellington ordered artillery to support the position, but instead of targeting the infantry, British guns fired at the French cannons. In their attempt to surround Hougoumont, a group of French soldiers forced open the northern gate, gaining access to the complex. A fierce battle ensued before the British were finally able to close the gate. The French that had gained entry were all killed. The cannon fire that started at Hougoumont spread across the battlefield. About 1 PM, Napoleon ordered his Grand Battery to launch a concentrated attack against the Allied centre, but as most Allied men were behind a high ridge, this failed to cause significant loss. Around this time, the Prussians started appearing in the distance. Napoleon believed he could beat Wellington before they arrived, but as a precaution sent a cavalry unit to cover his right flank. After 30 minutes of intense artillery fire, Napoleon ordered his infantry to attack the Allied right and centre. Around 18,000 men in 3 columns began marching towards Wellington's line. The large formation was an easy target for British cannons and inflicted losses on the advancing soldiers. A unit of French began attacking the recently reinforced La Haye-Saint farm. The rest continued advancing, and as they approached the ridge, Allied soldiers at the front fled, but the rest of Wellington's men were waiting behind, and as the French came over the high ground, the British fired, and then charged with bayonets. The French suffered severe losses, but still outnumbered their opponents. Suddenly, British heavy cavalry appeared. Hit by over 2,000 horses, the French formation collapsed and they began to retreat. The cavalry cut through the fleeing soldiers and quickly killed large numbers. Enthused with their success, they continued up to the French cannons, slaughtering the gunners. But out of position and unprotected, the cavalry were open to attack. Napoleon's infantry began shooting at them, and French lancers raced out to join the attack. Many British horsemen were killed, and the rest were only saved when a light cavalry unit came to their rescue. With the Prussians approaching, Napoleon sent more men and cavalry to stop them. He also ordered further attempts to gain possession of both Hougoumont and La Haye-Saint, although these efforts were unsuccessful. Needing victory before the Prussians arrived, the French commander Marshal Ney decided a cavalry charge might break the Allied line. French artillery resumed firing as 5,000 horsemen lined up. In response, Wellington arranged his soldiers into defensive squares, with his own horses placed behind. At 4 PM, the cavalry charged. When the French came within range, British cannons fired, killing many. The charge continued over the ridge, where they were met with a volley from the Allied squares, and British cavalry behind targeted stray riders. Unable to break the squares, the French pulled back, regrouped and attacked again, but with the same result. This tactic was repeated at least 6 times, and despite more cavalry joining in, the squares remained unbroken. With losses mounting and without success, the cavalry withdrew. At about 6 PM, the Prussians arrived and were attacking French positions near their right flank, and also from behind at Plaine-Saint-Noir village. With Hougoumont still untaken, Napoleon ordered Ney to capture La Haye-Saint. After a short battle and the structure set alight, the defenders retreated. Cannons were moved there and began hitting the Allied centre. Still in square formation, they incurred heavy losses. It was 7 PM. With the Allied centre under fire, Ney requested soldiers for another attack. After Plan Saint-Ouen had been secured, Napoleon gave Ney the last of his infantry reserve, his elite soldiers, the Imperial Guards. Marching towards Allied lines in squares, the Guard were blasted by cannons. Allied infantry began attacking the flanks, halting their advance, but the centre continued forward. On Wellington's order, a unit of British that had been keeping low behind the ridge rose up and fired a volley into the Imperial Guards, then charged with bayonets. The French fled. The sight of the retreating Guards collapsed the morale of Napoleon's army, and most started to flee. Seeing the French in disarray, Wellington ordered his men to advance and they began attacking the remaining French soldiers. Napoleon and the majority of his army fled the battlefield. At the end of the battle, the British and Prussians had combined losses of around 23,000 men. The French lost 25,000, with many more taken prisoner. This was a victory for the British. Waterloo was Napoleon's final defeat. Captured by the British shortly after, he was permanently exiled to the island of St. Helena. The British Empire gained new territories and Wellington would go on to become British Prime Minister. Europe remained at peace for another 40 years until the Crimean War.